Ignore it at your peril. Position, possibly the single most important concept in poker. You thought it was all about the cards. Nah, it's about where you're sat.
There's no right or wrong way to play poker. There's not one method that will guarantee success, but there are ways and means for you to maximize your chances of winning. There are good habits and bad habits. There are situations to avoid and situations to seek. And there are those who have the knowledge to exploit them. We're going to teach you how to master the game, from the basics to the advanced.
Previously on Everything Poker. In Show 1, we looked at the basics, the nuts and bolts of the game, and the order of action. Then in Show 2, we looked at starting hands. Exactly how good are those two cards you get dealt? Well, they're not bad. But it's now time to move on from the basics and take our first look at one of the most important aspects of the game. Ladies and gents, today's show is all about position.
Yep, it's time to teach you about position on the poker table and why it's so important. But what is position? Don't worry, all will be explained, and by the time we're finished, you're going to know exactly what it is and how to use it to your advantage. Almost time for today's tutorial. You should know by now that each show contains 3 distinct elements. The aforementioned tutorial, which runs you through the general principles, a hand or two from the vault to illustrate those principles in practice, and the pro analysis section, where a hand is dissected in detail, all geared towards improving your game. And who knows where that might lead. This show looks at poker played all over the world, but today we travel to Barcelona for a couple of hands from the European Poker Tour. And later on, we hear words of wisdom from 4 shooting stars of the poker world: Mattern, De Mello, Welbeck, and Veldhuis. We'll also hear more analysis from the 2005 World Series of Poker champion Joe Hachem. And as well as all this, we'll pay homage to this great game as we take a glance at where its origins lie. Okay then, pay attention. Time for that first tutorial.
Position on the poker table is very important. But what is it exactly? A player's position is defined by where they sit in relation to the dealer button. There are good positions and bad positions. Simply put, the later you have to act in any given round of betting, the better your position is. Why? Because you can gather more information if your opponents have to act first. You can base your action on their decisions, whereas if you have to act first, your opponents have the advantage of seeing your action before making their decisions. Here are the positions on the poker table. Remember, everything depends on where the dealer button is. The first position we introduce is immediately to the left of the dealer button, the small blind. As we discussed in the first show, the player in this seat has to post a mandatory bet. For example, if the blinds are $2, this player needs to post $1. Next to him in a clockwise direction, there is the big blind. The player in this seat has to post a bigger mandatory bet, $2, double the small blind. The blinds get to act last before the flop. But after the flop, they have to act first. You must remember this if you are considering playing a hand in these positions. And don't forget, when you act first, you are at a disadvantage. The next 2 seats are called early position. The player next to the big blind is referred to as under the gun, which is often shortened to UTG. The player in this position has the worst pre-flop position. They are the first person to fold, call, or raise, and don't have any information from the other players. After the flop, they still have to act very early, so it's classified as early position, which is a bad position in poker. Let's take a look at middle position. In these seats, you have the advantage of acting after the first few opponents, but you still have players to act after you. It is not a great position to be in. Finally, we have late position, by far the strongest positions in poker. The player to the right of the small blind is called the button. Before the flop, only the blinds get to act after the button. After the flop, the button is the last position to act. Naturally, if the rest of the players have made their decisions before you act, you are at a strong advantage because you can make your decision based on theirs. So bear all this in mind. The later your position, the better your situation. Recap. To recap then, the dealer button moves after every hand, so always, always, always bear your position in mind. If you are on the button, you have the dealer button in front of you. You are in the best position because you will be the last to act after the flop and will therefore have the benefit of watching all other players before you make your decision. You can bet Peter de Culver paid attention to position when he was learning the game. The former student graduated in 2005 and began to take poker more seriously. Honing his skills online, he dedicated himself to it on a full-time basis in 2007. In 2 short years, he had reached the pinnacle of the game when he won the European Poker Tour Grand Final in Monte Carlo and pocketed a staggering 2.3 million euros. Not bad.
Ready for some stats? I thought so. Let's look at which positions on the poker table win the most pots. We studied 1,400 different poker hands, both online and live, and here are the results. The percentages represent the amount of times each position won a hand. We can see that the position on the poker table that won the most hands was the button, winning almost 15% of the pots. The least successful was under the gun +1. The under the gun position, which acts first at the start of every hand, was relatively successful with a 10.4% success rate. This may seem surprising, but as the game has developed in recent years, many players have started to raise from this position, as it represents a very strong hand, whether they have one or not. If we break the table down into early, middle and late positions, we can see that the least successful seats were those in the middle position. If you think about it, it makes sense. Players in these seats don't have to post any blinds and have no real reason to play their hand, unless, of course, it's strong enough to win a pot. The most dominant table seats were those in late position. Firstly, this is because late position is the most common place for players to try and steal the blinds by raising before the flop. But also in these seats, a much wider range of hands will be played, as they have the advantage of watching everyone else act before they decide what to do. A high percentage of hands were also won from the early position seats. The reasons for this are also clear. As mentioned, the under the gun seat has recently become a fashionable place to try and steal the blinds. But also, early position includes the small and big blind, which will often contest a pot. As firstly, their last act before the flop, giving them the best pre-flop position. But secondly, and perhaps more importantly, most poker players don't like to give up their blinds easily.
You keep attacking my big blinds.
And will try and win the hand no matter what cards they have.
Everything you want to know about poker is divided into 2 levels. Level 1, the novice level. It tells you everything you need to know to get started in the game. You'll be a competent player by the end of these 6 shows. Learn the power of position, the art of bluffing, and all the basics. Once you've got the basics, we delve deeper. Level 2, the experience level, covers getting information from your opponents and the nuances of playing hands dependent on their strength and their potential. It focuses on playing styles, strategies, and tips you'll need to succeed and how to avoid costly mistakes. Following the review show at the end of Level 2, we should have covered everything you wanted to know about poker, and you will be ready to become a successful player. Plenty to come then, but let's refocus our attention, people, on the power of position and take a look at it being put to good use as we delve into the vault. We're going to show you action from Season 3 of the European Poker Tour and the Barcelona event, which featured 480 players, including the one and only Phil Ivey, who knows a thing or two about the game. Action is folded around to Ivey, and with 2 picture cards, connected no less, Ivey raises.
Have you done that because you have a hand, or it's because you're duty on the button?
Steve Pearson, the small blind, is suspicious of the button raise and thinks Ivey is only raising because of it, and so calls. However, when the flop comes 4-10 ace, we see a perfect illustration of how Ivey's position gives him the upper hand. Pierce has nothing and has to check. Ivey, who doesn't have much either, but does however have position, has seen Pierce check, seen a sign of weakness, and so can play his hand strong. He bets, Pierce folds. It's position played simply but effectively. Next hand, and the dealer button moves round. It is now in front of Stephen Pierce. He is the nominated dealer and has the optimum position on the table. Again, everyone folds before the action gets to him. He has a good but not great hand. In another position, he might fold the cards, but with the power position, he plays them with confidence.
I have a hand this time. It's not a button move, I have a hand.
Raising 3 big blinds. The small blind folds, and Dan Pedersen in the big blind needs to make a decision. Pierce chooses to remind him of the power of position and to tell a white lie.
I have king-queen suited.
Pedersen, knowing he'll be acting first after the flop is dealt, and therefore out of position, elects to fold. Wise move, we think.
You can look at the television next month, but they probably won't show this hand.
Well, actually, we're still showing it now. If you want to learn more about poker, go to PokerStars.com.
Time for a break, but before we go, a question. Earlier in the show, we looked at which position on a poker table won the most hands. In our study of 1,400 hands, which of the following had the highest percentage of wins? Was it A, the button, B, the big blind, or C, under the gun? We'll give you the answer after the break. Before the break, we asked, in our study of 1,400 hands, which of these positions on the poker table had the highest percentage of wins? The answer was A, the button. 14.9% of all hands were won by the player in this seat.
Now it's time for us to swat up on some poker lingo.
Let's give him a bad beat so he can go on tilt.
You're a master of the English language.
Calm down, buddy.
Keep going, kid.
Shut up, superstar.
Let's learn some terminology. Under the gun. Under the gun, or UTG when abbreviated, is the term given to the seat to the left of the big blind. The player in this seat is first to act at the start of every hand. They are under the gun because they feel the most pressure to make their decision. Cutoff. Ouch! This is the name given to the seat directly to the right of the dealer button. It is called the cutoff as when sitting in this position, you have the ability to cut off the button's chance to make the first raise. Hijack. The hijack is another slang term given to a position on the table. The player 2 seats to the right of the dealer button is always in the hijack seat. It is so called because from this position, you have the opportunity to hijack the cutoff and the button's chance to make the first raise. Suited connector. Suited connectors are cards of the same suit and in sequence. Players like playing these cards as they have great potential of making straights and flushes.
One person you'll often find suited and boosted is 2005 World Series champion Joe Hasham. Here's some more analysis from that very man, minus the suit.
Today we're going to talk about the importance of position. So in this hand, we see Pablo raise to 300 from middle position with ace-queen, which is a reasonably strong hand. It's folded around to Ray on the button with 8-9 of hearts. Now 8-9 of hearts is what's called a suited connector. Firstly, it's the same suit. Secondly, the cards are connected. Now it's a pretty looking hand, but what's really important about this is that he has position. He'll always be last to act in this hand. So he'll get to see what his opponent does before he needs to make a decision about what he's going to do. Ray calls. The flop comes 4-2-7 and misses both opponents, so neither of them has a pair. Pablo decides to check, leaving the incentive now up to Ray. Ray Ray, using his position to his advantage, elects to bet 400 chips, which now puts pressure on Pablo. Pablo decides to fold his hand, and there you have it. We see how important position is. Ray Ray wins the pot without making a pair, just using his position.
If you want to watch the show again, recap previous episodes, or join the series at a more advanced level, then go to everythingpoker.com.
Although the origins of poker are widely debated, it is generally accepted that poker's roots lie at the beginning of the 19th century in New Orleans, an area rife with the onset of gambling at the time. The name poker is the Americanization for the French word poker, as at this time, New Orleans had been under the control of the French. In its earliest recognizable form, a deck of 20 cards was dealt between a maximum of 4 people, each receiving 5 cards. After the cards were dealt, there was a round of betting as to the strength of one's hand. Because it was so deceptively simple, poker was the right game to fleece the right people, if you knew what you were doing. 1820 was when the Mississippi River became a goldmine of poker players that were to become notoriously known as riverboat dandies. On riverboats heading to and from New Orleans, there were plenty of tourists, merchants, and cotton growers for the poker players to take advantage of. At this time, to stay ahead of the masses' increasing understanding of the game, poker players changed the rules. It first went to a 52-card deck, and then they added the draw to get you to put more money into the pot. The game evolved during the American Civil War, and the introduction of drawing further cards enabled people to hit bigger hands more frequently. One of the earliest legends of the game can be identified as Wild Bill Hickok. He was a well-known cowboy, but in actual fact, he was a professional poker player who learned to be quick with a gun. 1876 was Bill Hickok's final poker game, when broken-nosed Jack McCall strolled in and shot Wild Bill. He was holding 2 aces and 2 eights, which is now known as the dead man's hand. As years passed, different variations of the game have been derived, but everyone's favorite No Limit Texas Hold'em was popularized by the Texas Rounders, including Doyle Brunson in the late 50s in Las Vegas, now recognized as the poker capital of the world.
Nice feature, but what's better, the old approach or the new approach? Only one way to find out, another feature.
Confucius once said, "Old age, believe me, is a good and pleasant thing." This used to be the case in poker, but the game has changed a lot over the last few years. And we're not just talking about the smoking ban. The old school is no longer the dominant force in poker. Now, the young guns grab the headlines with their flashy style and do-or-die attitude. Their play can be summed up in one word: aggression.
The new school is going to be on top of it, if it's not already the case. I mean, they're more aggressive, they know more about odds and a lot of mathematics stuff. I mean, they have like computers in the head.
They have no fear, they don't care about money. They like to be the winners, and that's it. There's no compromise for them.
No fear, and the cards speak. They know exactly what they're doing, and they're very smart.
Once upon a time, older guys were constant winners in tournament play. Nowadays, it's all about the new breed. The days of grinding out tournament wins are over. If the old school want to win in today's game, they need to wake up.
Some of the old school players are good, some are not so good. I feel like some are maybe like stuck in the past a little bit, and you know, the things that worked back then just doesn't work anymore, and they haven't realized that because they used to win all the time.
There's a lot of respect for the old school, but the game's been changing a lot, so you have to adapt. If you don't, it's really tough out there.
We need to pull our pants up and, you know, get with the program.
But don't count out the older generation just yet.
I would consider myself a hybrid of old school, new school kind of poker. I think I'm in touch with the old school, but I use a lot of the new school tools.
In poker, you really can teach an old dog new tricks.
Food for thought then, and before we move on, a question. Daniel's been around for a while. In what year did he win his first World Series of Poker bracelet? Have a think, Google it, and we'll let you know the answer after the powwow, as 4 pros discuss the different approaches to the game.
The Barcelona EPT event. Young guns face old foes in a battle of wits and a clash of the generations. It seems now more than ever there are 2 distinct philosophies in poker. The old school, tight and studious, versus the new school, adventurous, no rules. And somewhere in Barcelona, 10 stories above the tournament floor, 4 well-known faces from the world of poker discuss the two approaches. The Finnish high-stakes cash game player and World Series of Poker bracelet winner, Ville Walbeck. Former Dutch field hockey player and Olympic gold medal winner, Fatima de Mello. The French EPT winner and all-around nice guy, Arnaud Mattern. And one of the game's most aggressive players, Lex Veldhuis, who at just 27 has tournament winnings of over $500,000.
So let me know an interesting subject I want to discuss with you. What do you think about old school and new school of poker? Like, how would you describe the two differences, Lex, for example?
I would definitely say that old school people are like the older guys. You know, they always hung around casinos. They play all the live tournaments. Versus new school is really the hoodie kids and with the sweatshirts and playing a lot of online, and the younger guys pretty much. But I think they underestimate the old school players a lot.
What I've noticed is that the new school guys, they don't really look around at the table
like
for tells.
Tells are pieces of information gathered from players' behavior at the poker table.
It's more like
they miss a lot of things.
Yeah, they miss a lot of live things. I think they're so used to playing online and so many hands that when they're playing live, it's a big change for them. And I try to be like a bit in the middle, I think. I try to do the calculation a little better than, you know, like the old school guys maybe.
Those new school guys, you know, with the hoodies, the sunglasses, wearing the iPod, like listening to the music and not hearing what people have to say at the table. What kind of clues do you think they miss at the table? Like what kind of, you know, little details they're gonna miss?
If you don't look up, you can't see if someone's heartbeat's going up or if they're swallowing when you're 3-betting.
3-betting sounds complicated, but it's just another way of saying re-raising.
Or, you know, all those little things where if people do it all the time and you've seen a couple of their hands where they've done it, you can, well, you can misinterpret it, of course, but you can also pick up on those tells, and I think they help.
There was one example where I was at a table at the WSOP and I didn't have my headphones on, and then a new dealer sits down and I hear a guy next to me say, hello Meredith, how are you doing? I'm Jack. And just from that, you know he's not a professional player, because professional players always stick to themselves. They see hundreds of dealers come and go, they don't say hi anymore. So that guy introduced himself and he looked kind of like a pro. So then I knew he was a recreational player, and then later he re-raised me in a certain situation where I would think somebody could be bluffing, but I know he doesn't because he's a recreational player. And I think just by hearing him introduce himself to the dealer made me not go out of the tournament.
Yeah, it gives you a little click at that moment.
Yeah, it can be such a small detail, but...
I still consider myself like a new school player, more than an old school player, although I've played quite a few years. But the problem for me in live games is that the amount of hands you get is so small that I usually lose my patience at some point. And this is something that I think none of the old school players really do, because basically they played live poker for so many years. They are accustomed to just sit there for hours and keep their concentration, whereas I play mostly online, so I'm expecting to get like a lot of hands all the time, getting in the action and not being able to fold like minutes after minutes and after minutes. And at some point I get the feeling I have to start playing some hands.
It's a different set of skills. So what do you think would be the best approach for a beginner to try to learn about the game of poker and become good? Like the new school or the old school?
I think definitely the new school, because you have to gather a lot of information in the shortest time that you can, and then after that you have to learn how to use that information when you're actually playing. So I think starting with new school and then mixing in old school later is a very good combination. So I think definitely starting online to learn all the fundamentals really quickly, and
like
then
mathematics,
hand selection,
position,
everything. Then
starting hands.
If you can mix it in later with like live reads and patience and stuff like that, which is all really like old school stuff that you can learn, I think then you become a complete player.
Before the power, we asked you, in what year did Kid Poker win his first World Series bracelet? The answer? 1998.
Okay, so that's not everything you wanted to know about poker, but it's a good start. Let's review what we've learned today. We know what position means and why it is so important. We have explored all the positions on the poker table. Plus, we looked at how you can use position to your advantage.
To practice all you've learned in the show today, go to PokerStars.com and follow the simple instructions for downloading the free software. Once on the site, enter a play money table. And this week's task is to explore the power of position by playing only very strong hands in early or middle position and the majority of your hands in late position. If you take advantage of the information you gather from your opponents before making your decision, the results may surprise you.
Here's what's coming up next time. We return to focus on the topic of position, but this time we delve deeper and learn how position can allow you to win pots you otherwise wouldn't. We get more in-depth analysis from World Series champion Joe Hashim. And we were in London for some action from the European Poker Tour. Finally, we return to Barcelona, where we hear more priceless insight into the minds of poker's top talent. This is the greatest card game on the planet, ladies and gents. Let's master it together.